Thank you everyone for tuning into this podcast episode of Trending Echoes, happening right here in the beautiful city of Dubai, specifically at COP28 at the Expo City. We're also joined by a very interesting and amazing guest, which I'm excited about. We are here with the chairman of the Energy Institute in the Middle East, Dr. وضاح الهاشمي. دكتور أهلا وسهلا بك.
أهلا مرحبا فيك.
شكرا على حضورك.
الله يحفظك الله يحفظك.
دكتور طبعا event happening right now. It's probably one of the biggest events يعني بهذه السنة, COP28, right here at the Expo. Many world leaders. What is your thought currently on the event taking place? Are we able to make an impact this time around? Do you have a positive outlook? Tell us your thoughts on the event.
Okay, all right. So, Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Thank you very much, firstly, for inviting us across. It's very interesting and to be part of this COP happening obviously in the UAE and happening at this time of the year and happening at this time in sort of human history, and a lot of expectations. I think big expectations from a lot of people about what's going to happen, and شو تكون المخرجات, what are the things that we're gonna come out from this COP. And we can already see the UAE playing a very important leading role in setting up funds and talking about in investing into funds to help with what we would call the just energy transition. And I think it's extremely important to talk about that, and I think it's important to address the climate change issues in a very pragmatic way as well. So yeah, very exciting times, and I really do think that we're gonna come out with some tangible, inshallah, recommendations, and but it requires collaboration. The real impact is going to come as we see the nations coming together and collaborating more towards this. We can see in the last 20 years that there's been a slowly but surely a better collaboration between different nations. However, there's so many other aspects, socio-political, socio-economic pressures and issues. Some of the destabilizations that's happening around the region, around the world, which is also going to have, I think, not such a positive impact on the speed of change. But anyway, that is, as they say, c'est la vie,
Right. دكتور, برأيك يعني ما هو مقياس نجاح هذا الإيفنت? Or in other words, how can we actually measure the success? What are the benchmarks, or what are the elements that we can put in place to say whether this event is successful, or how can we gauge the impact that the event actually has? برأيك الشخصي يعني.
Well, it's not an easy thing to measure success. Immediate success would be obviously the kind of MOUs, the kind of recommendations which have been adopted, the kind of things that countries would sign up on. But just because they've just signed up on and put the when we signed up for the 1.5 degrees and the SDGs, that was a great success. Now, if you measure the success over time and see, okay, where are we right now from where we wanted to commit? So there's been some really good progress on certain SDGs, but in other SDGs, obviously, we've struggled, right? So the success, the overall success, will only be measured in the time to come. That's the difficulty. But in terms of the success of the conference itself, obviously, if the parties come together and agree to certain initiatives and certain collaboration that they're going to move forward with, and certain commitments surely on that. The other thing about this COP, which they've been talking about right from the beginning, which is very, very good, is leave no one behind. And I think the UAE, mashallah, have been extremely vocal with saying, well, look, there has to be an energy transition. They lead the energy transition, even though as a nation we are obviously very highly dependent on fossil fuels, but at the same time there is so much investment, so much research, so much collaboration around the world, so much investment not only in the UAE but around the world that the UAE is doing with regards to the energy transition. So that's one thing. The second thing is that the UAE has always been, mashallah, very, very collaborative in its approach, taking, pushing forward and whatever, and trying to help, trying to be the first mover, even though a small state in the greater scheme of things in this world. but still their contributions are always very, very positive. The contributions are always very, very big in terms of the magnitude, the money they're willing to put forward to push things forward. But really, I think what is very, very important, I think, you asked about success. I think success is going to be very dependent on if you don't leave no man behind, right?
Sure.
So I think the just transition is not only an energy transition, but a just transition which is required. We have a lot of countries around the world, they're feeling the pinch of climate change. They might not have the resources, they might not have the technology, they might have not the knowledge to be able to go through this transition effectively. The countries around the world, the developed states, states like emerging economies, big emerging economies, including the GCC and the UAE, of course, should try to help them move forward. And I think they're going to do that. I'm very, very positive about, only in the first couple of days, subhanAllah, there's been some fantastic things coming through.
Inshallah. Now, Doctor, not to get political, but you're talking about certain states that don't have necessarily the resources to be able to combat this. But you can look at a country like the United States, for example, which is probably one of the biggest emitters in the world, yet within the contribution, I think the financial contribution in the past couple of days, they were one of the least who contributed in terms of, I think, something like 17 million compared to 100 million from the UAE, 100 million from Germany, 76 million, I think, from Japan. Given that the US is one of the biggest emitters, why do you think that is? That they're not actually contributing? Because I understand when we talk about states that are struggling with the resources, but we're talking about the United States here. What do you think the reason is behind that?
I don't know really. I haven't looked much into it. I was actually quite surprised when I heard what they how much they contributed with. Before the COP, there's a lot of discussions which sort of take place. The States is obviously funding a lot of other things, and again, I don't want to get too political, but they're funding a lot of things around the world at the moment, and maybe that's what they budgeted for. But
sure.
Regardless, I mean, the fact that they've actually contributed towards this means that they're very much gonna commit and sort of are supporting this whole move forward. I know that the states also have, and in a way rightly so, have said that, look, all countries have to contribute. It's not only the big countries in the world that have to always contribute. Everybody should contribute and give whatever they can. Of course, you've got countries, in Latin America, in the Africas, and Southeast Asia and stuff like that may not have the same kind of resources in order, so they need to be supported. And in this just transition, the whole world is trying to move towards dealing with the climate change issues, and certain countries in the world. It's really very interesting. I studied environmental engineering. I'm an environmental engineer by training, and I remember many years ago, before I became an environmental engineer, so I went to study in the UK, and I remember there was this big issue. I don't know if you remember how old you are, but you look very young anyway.
43.
43.
I'll be 43 in a couple of days, actually.
So we're not far from each other. So you remember this thing called acid rain?
Of
right?
course.
Yeah. So the acid rain
caused by sulfur, right, in the atmosphere?
Sulfur that was coming out, emitted, and then it was mixing with the rain. And it was causing sulfurous acid. Right. And the sulfurous acid was, the problem is the rain that was coming down was actually, it was slightly acidic, and it was, a lot of buildings, ancient and historical buildings around different places in Europe, and it was really, really damaging that very old and very important heritage and infrastructure. And therefore there was a big move towards, look, we have to deal with this. Now the biggest emitter at that time was places like the UK. At the same time, the rain, obviously because of the winds and all that, the rains were dropping somewhere else. So you produce something somewhere, and then it affects
another part of the world.
So that's the story of climate change in a nutshell, right? So the climate change is, and I don't think that climate change is only caused by human activities, but I think it's a natural. I think there's a bit of science around this that there is also some natural reasons why this is happening. The people who don't want to address the issue of dealing with climate change, they say no, this is completely natural. and the people who are they go to the other side. They say no, everything is caused by human beings and climate change. And I don't think it's a bit of a mix of both. But it's very, very complex. It's not simple. The world today, geologically, whatever the atmosphere, it's not the same as 20 years ago. Things have been affected and changed. Interestingly, all the people who said that we went beyond we crossed the red lines and we went to the point beyond return. During COVID, you remember, right?
Of course.
So we saw the satellite pictures in February and March of 2020, and we saw amazing, all the skies are cleared up. There were places in India where you could actually see the Himalayas, and they were never seen from that point for like 20 years because of the smog and because of the pollution. But subhanAllah, I think it's reversible. And I think we need to believe that it's reversible, and we need to understand, and we need to play a balanced role in dealing with the climate change issues.
I really appreciate how you're kind of looking at things from both ends of the spectrum, let's call it, with people who believe it's one thing versus the other extreme, but then also being able to understand that it is complicated, and I tend to agree with that. Now, I would like to talk about something that I mentioned, that I noticed earlier, the UAE's transition. We understand that the UAE has been quite progressive in its journey to sustainability, especially compared to a lot of the surrounding countries.
Yep.
How far do you think the UAE has come, and where do we expect the UAE to go or to be in the near and long-term future in terms of the transition?
Well, we don't know where it's going to be. The one thing we are sure of is the UAE has been making commitments for the more than a decade now towards moving towards bringing in more renewables into the energy mix. I think the policy has been very, very clear from the Ministry of Energy and Infrastructure that we are balancing this transition. The transition is a transition, and a lot of people don't understand transition. Transition is that you don't switch off and then switch on tomorrow. It needs to be sort of a slow switch off. For many, many reasons. We have a lot of infrastructure which needs to be utilized, and these are big investments that need to be realized. The value needs to be realized. Sometimes we need to repurpose the infrastructure. I'm going to be talking in about half an hour on talking about greening jobs and about how do we repurpose, how do we reskill people, how do we bring in and use the skills and capacity. I mean, if you're running an oil company or you're running a renewables energy company, you still need the finance people, you still need the marketing people, you still need the operational people. Sure. Maybe the skills are slightly different, but in many ways, it's very, very similar. So the question of the repurposement is sometimes easy in certain areas and sometimes more challenging in other areas. But the most important thing is to have that will. And I think the UAE has demonstrated the will. You can see already, the installed capacity for solar, for example, has been increasing. I can't remember what's the installed capacity right now, but it's quite big, quite substantial. The percentage for renewables. Obviously, the UAE has also had the policy of gas or natural gas being sort of the natural transition bridge, which is the right way because it is it's still fossil fuel, but it's a lot cleaner.
Right.
And we're trying to fill that gap, but we're really accelerating the investments into that. At one time, actually, we had reached something like, I don't know, kind of about 5.5 cents per kilowatt hour with the solar.
5.5, sorry?
Cents, I think, per kilowatt hour, which at one time was a record. Obviously, it didn't last too long because mashallah, the Chinese came in and they broke that record very, very quickly. But we had reached that record. This was a few years back. So the idea of not only just building solar installations just for the sake of saying, we have a solar plant. No, really, I mean, it's part of the energy mix. Energy security, is a very, very important thing, and the UAE, like any other country, has to look at energy security as well. Absolutely. So it's greatly appreciated the way that I think we have a very balanced and a very pragmatic approach towards energy management here in the UAE, and that's also coming out in terms of the positive
I understand that you're also going to be talking at a session that we have, along with Trends, about the barometer that you got, energy barometer, UAE's energy barometer. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit more about that project? What is it exactly?
Okay. So sometimes, called the barometer study is similar to what we call a climate survey. Climate survey is to really try to understand where people's minds are at the moment. The energy barometer is something that we have been using in the Energy Institute in the UK for the last 10, 15 years. What it does is every year we actually ask all the energy professionals within the membership. The Energy Institute is an institute which is more than 100 years old.
Sure.
It's one of the oldest energy institutes in the world. It is incorporated by Royal Charter. That means that you become a chartered engineer, chartered environmentalist, chartered energy manager through the Energy Institute. So the Energy Institute had started this barometer many years ago, as I said. And every year just to check because then in the UK the Energy Institute being a non-government organization, membership organization, would then be able to help the government understand where the minds of all these professional energy specialists sits. What is very interesting, and we will be speaking about this on Monday when we officially launch the report. Monday, which is after tomorrow, right, here at COP28, very kindly hosted by Masdar, and they'll be talking about the kind of change. If I give you some key insights really into the study, so we have probably about 5 key points. One of them is the majority of participants fear climate change poses a greater threat to the way of life in the UAE 2050 compared to elsewhere in the world, with rising temperatures and shorter winters that create harsher working conditions cited by these biggest concerns. So that's one thing. The second thing, the pace of global transition to low carbon accelerates. They also identify risks to the UAE's economy associated with the dependence on obviously fossil fuel markets and higher than average sort of energy consumption intensity, because we are seeing great growth. And great growth needs to be supported by greater capacity, right?
Sure.
To be able to fuel that kind of growth. There is confidence, however, in the prospects of meeting the targets designed to counter these risks, right? So more than 60% of respondents expect that the UAE to meet or exceed the 2030 emissions reduction goal and cut that by about 40%. A similar proportion believes that the UAE will meet or exceed the 2050 energy diversification goal, so 50% of the total energy coming from renewables, that includes nuclear, of course. The UAE is seen as well-funded to make the necessary investments to clean energy, including financing renewable energy and low-carbon hydrogen, though there are calls for greater clarity around, obviously, policies, regulations, and market mechanisms required for that. And finally, energy efficiency is singled out as an opportunity area that needs the most focus and investment in the UAE, with particular reference to demand management. So we have to really, and the demand management, is covered in many areas. Of course, it's the education, the awareness, and people consumption trends, the way that they address this, the way that we encourage, the utility companies and the government policies, sort of encourage people to become more efficient in the way that they use energy. Energy is very heavily related to water, because in this country we 90+% of our water comes from desalination. Yes. So there's important aspects of that. So, but management in air conditioning, water consumption, desalination, as well as less carbon intensive production, the use of oil and gas. So all these issues. So these are some of the key insights into what the report has. But the report has a lot of details and depth into where are the areas where they see some of these respondents felt that there was greater confidence in solar, where they see we've got hydroelectric now in Hatta, which was a nice it's a very, very nice, interesting project, but how much scalability is possible and things like that. So there is some skepticism, but overall I think it was very, very good. I think a very insightful report, and I think it'll be very, very useful once people can use that in the area of research.
And the report or the results of this report, or I'm assuming it's like a survey almost, was performed where? On what sort of audience or geographic location?
Okay, so
Are these UAE residents, in other words?
Yes, mainly people who are working within the UAE,
Right.
who are members of the Energy Institute or associate members. The Energy Institute has more than about 21,000 members around the world.
Okay.
There's obviously a much smaller proportion who are working here, probably only around I would say about 10-12% of them work within the UAE and the GCC. And of course, in surveys, I think this survey we got a response rate of, I can't remember, it was around about 15 or 18%, which is not bad for surveys. But then what we did is we followed with a sequential mixed methods approach to our research. And so what we did is we found out what the surveys was telling us. We did focus groups. We also did a launch where we brought in people, where we used a Mentimeter. So we used different data points, and we used that. And then finally, what we did is we did some interviews with around about, I think, 12 or 14 quite senior energy specialists to try to rationalize what the survey results and all the focus group results were coming in. So quite an interesting, academic exercise. I don't know if you can get a PhD for it, but I can tell you, because being a researcher myself, we really did follow some really, really rigorous methods of getting some really, really good data. And so I think it's going to be very, very useful, as I said. And it's the only one of its kind.
Right.
That's the most important thing as well. Yeah.
Right. Now, Doc, let's quickly talk about, for the lack of better terms, let's call them the next generation, right? The youth. How much do you think we are actually doing towards the next generation in order to educate them, or maybe let's call it sustainable literacy, right? How much are we actually doing, and how much more could we do for the next generation to be able to adopt what is being put into place now? Let's call it some sort of foundation, right? How much can they actually adopt, and how can they move forward? What do we need to do from our side?
I think what we need to do from our side is empower them and actually allow them. With all due respect, Umar, these younger generation are the ones who are actually pushing for this more. We're the ones who are a bit more conservative and saying, okay, we need to do this, because we tend, as we grow older, to become to like greater stability and not like disrupting things too much. But younger people have got greater amount of disruptive thinking by nature, and therefore, but they have a lot of ideas, they have a lot of innovation, they have a lot of great thought. I see this in my kids. They have an awareness of, like, for example, the amount of energy they're using or the resources that they're using. I mean, I'm very lucky to have be the father of the UAE's youngest twin chefs at the age of 13, becoming certified commissed chefs, and they do a lot of workarounds. And even when they did their diploma, they were talking to me because of my background in some sustainability, and I remember my daughter talking to me about, hey, Dad, this thing about sustainability, this, and trying to explain to the concepts. And it's amazing that these concepts are actually quite natural concepts. They're natural concepts, and natural concepts that they understand.
Sure.
So we don't really need to teach them the concepts. We just need to give them the empowerment. We need to give them the psychological safety to explore and push and with the greater innovation. Because as you grow older, I mean, people ask me, so how did your kids become chefs? I said, actually, because they became chefs at the age of 13. They said, wow, it's very difficult at the age of 13. I said, no, actually, the fact that they were 13 probably made it easier for themselves. Because if I wanted you to start doing something new, Umar,
right,
you'll probably say, oh, no, I might fail.
Yeah, it's a bit harder at an older age.
It's a bit harder,
of course.
Yeah. You say, well, no, because we have this propensity to try to avoid doing things because we fear failing.
Absolutely.
Right? But with the younger kids, they're not like that. There is no fear. They just go out and just do it.
Not to get off topic here, but I do want to mention this. What you're saying is absolutely true and amazing, and I actually noticed this the other day. So at my studio, I've interviewed some amazing, well-known global names, from Tony Robbins to Steve Harvey, Bill Gates. The list goes on, right? And I've done these interviews on the behalf of Forbes. a lot of people who just step a foot into the studio tend to get really nervous. You got the spotlights, you got the stage, you got everything else. And it's interesting because my son was with me not too long ago. And I told him, I said, would you like to do an interview? And I was telling him how many people sat in that exact chair. Mm-hmm. And he was thrilled. And it was very natural. He's 7.5, mind you. But it really got me thinking how at a younger age you're willing to take those risks or initiatives or steps, whatever it is, but we become less considerate of the opportunities once we get older because of the fear aspect. So,
of course, so we need to guide them, we need to support them, we need to give them the psychological safety. There's a lot of stuff. I'm also the chairman for the UAE chapter advisory board for the Board Directors Institute, GCC, and just a couple of days ago I was at the Hukama Institute conference. And one of the things that we were discussing, the measurement of intangibles, right? Mm-hmm. Intangibles. And so one of the things about the intangible value that companies bring is obviously driving that change in the younger generation, the social value that the organization brings, and how do you measure that, the goodwill, etc., and all the CSR stuff that's pushed forward. So, and I said, to really in terms of measuring the intangibles, one of the things is that, you as a big organization, you might think that you're great and you're big and you're a good paymaster and stuff like that. But a lot of young people won't want to work with you. Right. Because they just think, hey, listen, man, the values that I have are different. And they're willing to do that, which is very different to what was happening before. So there's a very, very big challenge. So the question was put, how, do we need to incorporate younger board directors into the board? Because the board, who are all these, typically, sort of older, 50-plus white men,
the typical stereotype.
Yeah, it's typical stereotype, and I've got a golf handicap of around about par 15, minus 15 or something like that, and these guys, sort of make decisions for companies on a strategy which is going to have 5 to 10 years forward. And you're driving the strategy of something with another bunch of people, so younger bunch of people. So there's a big argument to bring in ideas at least, and bring in the thoughts and engage with younger people. So I think of course part of the solution is to bring in younger people. And
two things before we wrap it up. Number one, obviously, very glad and thankful for the Trends for allowing this platform, being able to give us all a voice. To be able to send a message out there. So two things. Number one, what is it that you would like to share with the audience? Anything it could be. And number two, what are Dr. Wadah's expectations or hopes in simple bullet point format from COP28 here in the UAE?
Okay. Well, let me also say that I'm very honored and to be moderating a session, inshallah, in the Atlantic Council Trends event, which is happening on Tuesday, I think Tuesday.
The 5th, I believe.
Yeah, 5th and 6th I'm very happy to be part of that. It's going to be a panel, I think, about energy transition and stuff like that. I'm really interested in moderating that and hearing and learning from my fellow panelists. I think in terms of, I think your first question was...
What message would you like to share?
I think the message is be positive. I think we have to remain positive. I think there's a lot of things which are happening around in the world at the moment. The world is becoming very, very complex. There's so many things happening around, but I think we have to, as humanity, have hope in the way forward. I think, and I'll give you just one very simple example. In the past, we had this big problem called the ozone layer, and we had a big hole in the ozone layer. I think we that problem hasn't 100% gone away, but it really has. It could have been much, much worse. We took action as humanity, and we said, okay, we're not going to use CFCs anymore. We're going to get rid of things that were really destroying the ozone layer. We put our minds together. We did it, and humanity was able to reverse something. So it's when people tell me, oh well, no, it's just we've got to the point of no return. No, I think of course there are certain things which we've polluted a lot of rivers, but now we can work on the technology to clean all that up. Right. So that brings us to the last point on COP, and where I feel that COP's going. I think COP this time is going to come up with some really tangible and very pragmatic solutions moving forward. Now, again, we go back to what you asked me how do we measure success? I won't know. We'll have to measure it in about 5 years' time. But we have to be committed. We have to be positive, and we have to work together. Not equally, because different countries have got different things. Some countries have got very good resources. Some countries have got very good technology. Some people have got very good manpower. Some countries have got big land masses or natural resources. I think we have to work together equitably rather than equally and say, well, states has to pay 100,
Right.
we have to pay 100. No, it doesn't work that way. I think we all have to give with whatever we can.
Sure.
But we have to work together collaboratively, and we have to remember that there's only one Earth, and we all have to live on it. So
Absolutely.
go take
Now,
care of it.
it's. I know we're supposed to wrap things up, but I'm really enjoying this conversation with you, and I want to ask one last question. In fact,
Yes, sir.
I've seen a comedian. I mean, he's a comedian. Maybe we shouldn't take it too serious, but it really was eye-opening when you're talking about we only have one Earth. A lot of people say we cross a point of no return, and it's interesting because this comedian said that if people believe that we can actually, first of all, the question I want to ask, based on what the comedian said, is, what are we trying to fix here, or what are we trying to protect? Are we trying to protect Mother Earth, or are we trying to protect ourselves as humanity? Because his joke was, a lot of people are delusional, thinking that we need to protect the planet, because the planet has been here for 4.5 billion years and probably will be here for a lot longer than that. The planet has always managed to wipe us out if it wanted to, fix itself, and stand around. So really, is it the planet that we're trying to protect, or is it humanity we're trying to protect? And how much truth do you think there is to his joke of, we can't really do anything to harm the planet? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, of course. I sort of agree with the cynicism. So, so I was, I was at an event a couple of days ago with the board directors, and there was one of the directors, the members, had asked someone from the IFRS, the International Financial Reporting System, and then he was saying, but the Europeans are always talking about this and the just transition or whatever, and then they don't want the Africans doing this, they don't want them, and this is going to affect people's lives and the quality of lives and stuff like that. And at the end, the CEO of the BDI said to me, "Wضaح, I was surprised that you didn't give a comment." I said, "No, I didn't. I don't want to give a comment, on this." I said, "Yeah, I kind of agree with this point of view, but I also agree with the fact that we've got to do something. We've got to change something. So it's not, you got to have a very balanced approach. I've got a very, very balanced approach towards everything. I don't like swinging from side to side." And but the issue is, I told him, just as a joke, I said to him, one of the ways I can develop a fund that you only one industry, and you're not going to need any other industry, and you'll have so much money, you'll have surplus money, that you're going to be able to take that money and spend it on other things as well, besides for dealing with climate change issues and the 17 SDGs and then some,
Right.
And he said, "Yeah, really? What's that?" I said, "Every time any country drops a bomb, right? They should offset. They should offset with buying carbon. So they should then buy the carbon, put it into a fund,
Right.
And that fund, and then let's see how big that fund is going to be in a year's time." Right?
Wow. Yeah.
So and I think and I said in terms of the S1, S2,
Yes.
kind of emissions,
Yes.
Also the weapon manufacturers, the countries behind the weapon, all of them should also do their bit and pay for offsetting that carbon.
Absolutely.
So then we can continue with these wars and blow things up and keep on because every time you throw bombs around the world. I mean, there's a
Right.
a huge amount of pollution, huge amount of thermal energy which is released. And then we talk because a lot of people become very skeptical. They say, well, you want me to change my car from a petrol car to an EV car, which requires so much energy to actually manufacture the car, the batteries, all these issues that go back to mining. It's a very, very complex issue. And then you say, well, we continue to do these. So we could do all this with industry, but at the same time, the biggest industry and then probably the most profitable industry, regrettably, in the world is obviously the arms industry. And so I'm not being cynical. I'm just saying it's a nice idea,
Yeah.
And I'm interested how much, if we offset those, by the same standards and offset the carbon there, how much money, and we just had a fund, and a fund dealt with the UN.
Right.
And then every time you drop a bomb, you sort of had to pay some carbon credits. I think we'd be...
There's got to be a way to somehow measure that.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of worried now that you might have given me something that's going to keep me up at night, just trying to calculate. But, Dr. thank you very much. It was an absolute honor for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. What a wonderful conversation with Dr. Wضاح الهاشمي. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for watching this episode of Trending Echoes right here from Dubai. And we'll see you in the next episode.